Hi, fourth grade. So today we're going to be talking about changes to the land. So two words you hear a lot is weathering and erosion, and you sometimes hear them together. So a lot of students and adults get confused at the difference between weathering and erosion. Weathering is actually the breakdown of rocks and minerals due to wind, water, and other natural processes that occur in one place. And what I mean is the wind can blow on a rock for millions and millions of years, picking up small sediments to hit at that rock until it finally breaks. But it stays right next to the original rock. Now, weathering also occurs with water. Standing in one location over time, it can cause lakes or divots inside rocks or other minerals. Snow causes a lot of issues with weathering, especially up north, because when it melts and refreezes, the ice pushes out those rocks and minerals. And a big issue you would see up north is potholes. And that's because in the roads, and when it rains or snows and then it gets really cold at night and freezes, it pushes tiny cracks out, causing major issues and eventually causing weathering of the road and huge holes. So as you drive, you'll hit a pothole. Erosion, even though weathering and erosion can work together to build something like the Grand Canyon, erosion is actually the moving of the rocks and the sediment. So the weathering for the Grand Canyon would be the water that's constantly hitting and pelting tiny sediments against the other rock formations to break it apart. But the erosion is actually the moving of it down the river. So erosion is actually the picking up and moving. But there's another word that often gets left out. It's called deposition. Deposition is where it drops back down. So erosion is the picking it up and the moving it. But deposition is the actual dropping it to its new location and having it stay in its new location. So deposition, D, drop, D. Deposition means drop. Erosion is the moving. So wind can cause weathering by, like I said, blowing. Water can cause weathering. Just like we talked about with the Grand Canyon, it constantly has small particles hitting the bigger rocks, but it's the erosion that actually moves it down the river, and it's the deposition that drops it either on the river banks or in tiny pools of sedimentary spots that you would see. Something else that helps with weathering and erosion is severe weather. So that's anything that can cause damage or is life-threatening. So think of a lot of lightning, a hurricane, tornadoes. Today, we are going to make a tornado in a jar because a tornado has a lot of erosion with it. It actually picks up a lot of sand or debris or dirt or houses, and it moves it somewhere else and then deposits it in someplace new. People and animals actually help with erosion too. Have you ever had dirt stuck on your shoe? That's erosion. You're picking up dirt from one location, and when you knock it off, that's deposition. You've moved that dirt and dropped it somewhere new. So we are going to, again, do a severe weather experiment with a tornado in a jar. So what you need for this is water, Dawn dish soap, and vinegar. Most of the time when I do this in the lab, I use regular vinegar. It doesn't make the water as cloudy, but all I have here is apple cider vinegar, so we're just gonna do with what we have. All right, and you also need sediment, something that you can move around. And I'm going to try it with beads. Most of the time I like to use glitter because it's really light and it moves easily. But again, I have a bunch of glitter at the lab, but I don't have a lot of glitter in my house. So I'm going to use these beads. So what you're going to do is hopefully have a mason jar because you can screw the lid on tighter and it's not as big. When your jars get really big, like my jar is, it can cause an issue with actually forming the tornado nice and neat, but you gotta work with what you have. And we're just gonna hope everything stays inside the jar. So if I had my jar, I'm gonna go ahead and put 3 cups of water inside my jar. Now you will see a little bit of bubbles, and that's because I tried this experiment earlier today and just all the soap isn't out. Now I accidentally dropped a little bit of water out of my cup, so I'm gonna add a little bit more. And again, if your jar is bigger, you're just gonna have to eye it and make sure you have a good amount in the jar. Hopefully this will work, we'll see. I kind of feel like my jar is really, really wide. I'm just gonna add a little bit more water. We'll see what happens. Hopefully it does what it's supposed to. Now, if I had my mason jar, I'm gonna put 1 teaspoon of Dawn dish soap. I only have a ½ teaspoon here, so that means I need to put 2 halves to make a whole. And you're not going to mix it together. Do not stir it. I'm actually gonna do 1 1/2 and see if that helps because I added all that extra water. So we'll see if that helps with our tornado formation. And then you're going to do 1 teaspoon of vinegar if you have a mason jar. Again, I'm gonna do 1 1/2 because I wanna keep my vinegar and Dawn dish soap equal with how much you put in there. So if you change it and adjust it like Miss Bender, make sure you do equal parts vinegar to equal parts Dawn. That means the same number of drops for Dawn dish soap and the same number of drops for vinegar. Now you put your sediment in. I'm gonna put my beads in. Get in there, bead. There we go. Now these might not work because they like to float, but we will see what happens. You secure your lid. With a mason jar, we would have screwed it on tightly, but with this guy, we're just hoping it's secure. You grab it at the top and the bottom, and you shake it around really good, and there's your tornado. It's actually forming pretty good, and you can see where it's picking up the beads as sediment really, really well. So you can actually see the tornado forming in the jar. And that is how severe weather messes with erosion and helps erosion and weathering by picking up sediment and moving it, because weathering is the breaking down, erosion is the picking up, and deposition is the dropping it back down. So one more time, one more good spin of this tornado jar. Really, really good.
I can help you.
And really, really good. And there's the tornado. That little voice you heard was my son Logan offering to help. So now that you've learned about weathering, the breakdown, erosion, the moving, deposition, the dropping, and severe weather and how that affects, head on over and take my quiz. I'm sure you guys will do great. Bye, 4th grade.